Fabulous. Hi, welcome everyone. Really, really great to see you. Thank you for joining us today. And if you're family or friends of people who have been baptized, and so you're coming perhaps for your first time, a very, very warm welcome to you. We are delighted that you're here with us. We're into week 2 of a series which we've entitled The Good Life. Now, whether anyone has a faith or no faith at all, everyone, I think, every one of us, we're united in this idea that we want to be able to live the good life. I mean, who wants to live a bad life? No one does. The problem that we have, though, is that we're not quite sure what the good life is. And secondly, we're not quite sure how to find it, how to be living it. And so what tends to happen is that there are lots of roads that people go down in order to try and find the good life. And we picked up on this last week. And so if you missed last week, and you can catch up via our website. But we talked about the popular idea. If I can just have enough likes, if I can have enough people who would be my friends, then I'm going to find the good life. The wealth one, we know, money doesn't make you happy, but we'll give it a go just in case. We have success, we have independence. We try all of those roads to see if we can find the happiness and the good life that we're after. But Jesus once was talking about this, and he spoke about a different kind of road. And it wasn't those, it was this road. He spoke about the narrow road. Now, I get it. Hearing about a narrow road doesn't sound very appealing. It sounds quite kind of constricting, doesn't it? But what Jesus was speaking about was, well, it was part of a very famous message or sermon or talk that he gave. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. This is where he was talking about living the good life. And the Sermon on the Mount's about 2,000 words. It's primarily found in Matthew's account of Jesus' life. And it's Matthew chapter 5 through to chapter 7, where Jesus gives this message on a mountain. He's sitting down. He's got his disciples with him. He's got crowds of people coming to listen to him. And those words that Jesus spoke at that time, those words have impacted our world in ways that, honestly, we cannot fully grasp. Because his words were the foundation of a movement that actually has changed the whole world. Last week we talked and we were thinking about what it is to live a blessed life. Being blessed is more than just being happy because nice happenings are happening. Being blessed is a happiness that goes beyond that it gives you that assurance that you are loved and that you are valued. It's a happiness beyond happenings, beyond our circumstances. And what he said about a blessed life was polar opposite to what everyone at that time, and still probably today, people would think. Now, people would think that a blessed life is if you're healthy, if you're wealthy, if you're successful, if you have status. That's what the blessed life is. And Jesus turned it on its head. And he said these things. He says that God blesses the poor, the sad, the humble, the righteous, the merciful, the pure, the peacemaker, the persecuted, those insulted people waiting for a reward in heaven. That was the list that he gave for a blessed life. And if you and I, and I'm sure for those that were on that mountainside listening to him there, they would have thought, flipping heck, what have we signed up for? Looking at that list. Is that what we are? And so what I want to do today is I want to take us on the next step, the next thing that Jesus said, because it will help to make more sense to these things as well. Because being on a narrow road, the narrow road that Jesus spoke about, is not only a blessed life, it's also a purposeful life. That we are created on purpose for purpose. I am one of those kind of suckers for gadgets when they're being modeled or demonstrated, when there's a little crowd of people. So I'm not allowed to go to the Ideal Home exhibition anymore or any of those kind of events because, of course, you've got people on a stand and they're demonstrating their gadget. And I'm one of those people who kind of really leans in and when they say something funny, I laugh out loud and I agree with them. And of course, then they just start talking to me and it gets to the end of the demonstration. I think, blimey, my life's going to be missing out so much if I don't have this. So the last time that I went to I think it was the Ideal Home exhibition or something like that, I got one of these gadgets. Come on, baby. Now, this is a mandolin. Now, the guy who was demonstrating that, he was brilliant. And do you know what? Well, obviously, I've bought it, haven't I? Where's Ben? Ben, can you come up? It's very difficult to hold a microphone and do the demonstration, so I thought I'd bring someone beautiful out to be able to do this. And so, I mean, yes, thank you. Yeah, I've actually done that bit. But anyway, right. So we've got an onion here, okay, an onion. Now, if you're in the kitchen and you're having to chop an onion, let's just say you have to chop it really finely. One, you have to sharpen your knives to start. Isn't sharpening knives boring and horrible and just a kind of thing to do? No, you don't need to because we have this. Here we go. Just demonstrate, Ben, for us. Oh, that is beautiful. I tell you, stop. I mean, that is fine. That is good. That is better than what you can do with a knife. What you could do with a knife. So, but actually, I want to have some bigger chunks. I want to have a bigger chunk of onion. So come on, that's right. Just pull it out. That's right. Come on, Ben, you can do it. Okay, hold the microphone. So, sometimes demonstrations go wrong. Anyway, yeah, so we want a bigger slice this time. Sorry, bigger chunks. Come on, let's have a look at that. That's coming on. See, isn't it easy? So easy. Look at that. I mean, we've now got bigger chunks. I tell you, this item here has transformed my life. It has. It has been absolute. Thank you very much, Ben, for that demonstration. Yeah, no, don't clap. It wasn't that good, honestly. But I think someone at some point was in the kitchen, they were busy doing their vegetables and thinking there must be a better way to do this. And then all of a sudden, something sprung to their minds and they came up with this brilliant, brilliant device for the kitchen. It was made on purpose for purpose. You misuse the purpose, you lose your finger. I tell you, you never have to sharpen these. This is just, you can buy, I'm going to set up a stall afterwards. And no, not really. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because you and I have been made on purpose. We're not an accident. We've been made on purpose, but we've made for purpose too. And what Jesus says helps us to kind of answer a little bit of those kind of big questions that every now and again kind of slot into our minds. Maybe we're at a funeral or something difficult or traumatic has happened, and it causes us to ask those questions such as, what am I here for? You know, does my life matter? Does my life count? Will I be remembered after I die? And we live with those kind of deep questions every now and again. And Jesus, in this famous message, TED Talk, 2,000 words, whatever it is, he brings an answer to that question. And what he does is that he uses two kind of word pictures to help to explain our purpose. This is how he starts. He says this: you are the salt of the earth. Salt in Jesus' day was very valuable. People would sometimes be paid in salt rather than in currency, money. It had huge value. We sometimes use that phrase, don't we, that a person is worth his salt or worth her salt. Sometimes if we're talking about someone, we would just say, oh, they're the salt of the earth, they are. So it's a kind of a phrase which is familiar within our kind of vocabulary. But salt, the reason why salt was so valuable was that salt was a preservative. Its primary purpose was to preserve. Well, I'll put up here, this is what a preservative is. It's a substance added to food to prevent decomposition due to chemical change or bacteria action. So without this preservative, food will rot, food will decay. Israel is a very warm country. It doesn't store food well. And so without the preservative, food decomposes, it rots, and it stinks. And Jesus, here on the mountain, talking to his disciples and those who were interested, the crowds, He says, and it sounds like a bit arrogant, really. He says that you are the preservative of the earth. Without you, the world rots, the world decays, the world stinks. Now, as I said, that sounds a little bit kind of weird and arrogant, but we have to understand the culture in which Jesus was speaking in at the time. This was a culture where strength ruled, okay? So it was run by, the country, Israel, was run by the Romans. They had invaded, they had taken over. And basically, whoever was strongest was the mightiest, was the winner. And so moral and ethical kind of things didn't matter. It was basically who's got the bigger sword, who's the strongest person, because might would always win. And it was a culture where if you were a woman, you had no rights. No rights, no value, no rights. If you were a child, you had very few rights. Mercy, compassion, generosity, they were deemed as weak. Strength and force ruled. And this was the context in which Jesus was speaking to his followers. Now, you and I, we have to recognize that we live in a very different world to what was going on then. And what we assume as kind of common decency is actually based on Christian values, which has been built on the message that Jesus brought in the Sermon on the Mount. So even a man called Richard Dawkins, some of you will have heard of Richard Dawkins. He wrote a very famous book called The God Delusion, kind of outlaying his understanding and belief that religion is a waste of time. There is no God, and we just have to make the most of life. He would do debates with all kinds of people, and in the early 2000s, he was kind of one of the founders of what was known as the New Atheist movement. Really interesting now if you hear him interviewed. This is what he calls himself. He says, I'm a cultural Christian. Now, Richard Dawkins doesn't believe in God, still doesn't do that. But he calls himself a cultural Christian. Why? Because he acknowledges that he lives by the values that have been set out by Jesus in this incredible sermon found Matthew 5 to Matthew 7. So we have to ask ourselves, why do we think generosity is good? Why is kindness and compassion a real strength? Why is mercy good and forgiveness good? Well, it reflects a worldview that's based on Christian values taught by Jesus himself. And Jesus' teaching has influenced our world through those first century Christians who not only listened, not only believed Jesus, but actually lived out what Jesus was teaching. They had no political or financial standing at all. But when Jesus said to them, you are the salt of the earth, he was saying to them, if you don't preserve the good, this world rots, it decays, it stinks. And we benefit, and we might not realize this, but we benefit every single day from a worldview that says that every man, every woman, every child has value, has equal value, that each person ever made has worth. So when we watch the news, and this is where the dilemma comes in. When we watch the news and we see Russia invading Ukraine, and we have this man, Putin, and we see him on the telly, and we kind of think, why? How can he carry on doing this with so much death? If you were watching the news on the 7th of October, 2023, when Hamas came into Israel's territory and killed so many people and took those hostages, it just makes you question what on earth is going on in their mind that they would do such an horrendous crime like that. And then as we've watched subsequently, as Gaza has been bombed and thousands of people have been killed and thousands of people displaced and just cities actually just smashed to the ground, we think, what's behind all of that? Why does that happen? Why do we feel that it's wrong? And secondly, why does it happen? Well, I'll tell you why it happens. It's because they see the world very different to you and me. On Monday evening, on Monday, Sarah and I, along with Neil and Anne Sargent, we just went to Amsterdam for a 3-day break. Had such a good time. And on the Monday evening, we visited Anne Frank's house. She was the young girl who hid along with her family and another family from the Nazis for 2 years. They were hiding. 2 years, they never stepped out of the house. And this little girl who wanted to be an author and a writer, she kept a diary and she wrote out, and that's now become a very, very famous book. But when they were eventually found, they were taken to Auschwitz, and then some of them were then split up, and some of them went to Belsen concentration camp, and it was there that Anne Frank died. 6 million Jews killed during the Second World War by the Nazis. How could the Nazis do that? How can they go home and then have tea? How does that happen? I'll tell you how it happens is because they see the world different to you and me. Their worldview is radically different. Which is why Jesus said, you're the salt of the earth. You have to preserve the good. You're the salt of the earth. The second picture that Jesus picked up on was this one. He goes on to say this, you are the light of the world. A city placed on a hill cannot be hidden. In some versions, it's got the word built, a city built on a hill, but I've used the translation placed because that's what they were. So when cities were built, they were placed on a hill, partly for security, so they could see if enemies were coming nearby. And they were built with limestone, white limestone. And so during the day, as the sun was out, the city on the hill would kind of almost gleam in the sunlight. And when it came to darkness at night, people would light their oil lamps. And again, because the city was high and because it was dark, those oil lamps would just shine out for people to see. He said, a town cannot be hidden. Because why? Because a city that's placed strategically on a hill. Jesus is saying this, that he's saying that you are strategically placed where you are to shine a light for good. And you might sit here this morning, if you're watching online, you might be watching this thinking, well, I'm not strategically placed. You know, I just work in an office, or I'm just a TA in a local primary school. Some of you might be farm laborers, or you might be working for the NHS. And you kind of think, well, I kind of just fell into that. That's you know, my parents did that, and so I just kind of followed that. I didn't give it any thought. It's not strategic. But what you might think as random, God sees us as being a strategically placed light. Jesus goes on to say this, neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. And in the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and say, wow, what a lovely person. Oh, no, it doesn't, sorry. And it says, and glorify your Father in heaven. In other words, he's saying, live your life in such a way as that people don't just say, she's nice, or he's nice. No, live in such a way so that people ask questions. Questions like, why would someone be so generous? Why would a family of 4 or 5 still choose to foster another child when it must disrupt their family? Why would they do that? Why would my boss give me another chance even though I cost my company thousands because of my mistake? Why would my boss, who I know is a Christian, why would he not sack me? Why is someone so consistent in visiting that elderly person in the village, taking a cake every week just to be able to sit with them and talk? Why do they do that? That's extraordinary. That's what Jesus is speaking about here. Not so just a nice person, but asking those questions, why? And Jesus is basically saying, don't make it about yourself. Don't make it about you looking good. Live in such a way so that people start to connect the dots between your lifestyle and your Father in heaven. In other words, be a dot connector. That's what we're to be. And the followers of Jesus in those first few years acted on this. They listened to what Jesus said and they built the firm foundation. That's what we've been singing about. The firm foundation of their faith in Jesus. They looked to express that in everyday life, being salt and being light. They knew that was their purpose. So they rescued children who had been abandoned because of either a disability or that a family just didn't want the child. And they would take those children or that child into their home. When a plague hit a village and the pagan priests and everyone who was still healthy kind of legged it out of there as quickly as they could, who was it who went to sit with the dying? Who was it who went to nurse them? It was the Christians. And people looked on to say that they're not even afraid of dying in order to show care to people. They lived in such a way, their lifestyle was such that the pagans, the Greeks, the Romans began to connect the dots. And quite extraordinary, if you look at the history of the world, you'll discover that within just a few hundred years after Jesus sat on a mountainside and was talking to his disciples and the crowds, the world has been turned upside down. Not because of good preaching, not because of great worship bands, but because people were willing to live out their purpose of being salt, preserving the good, and being light, showing a way to the Heavenly Father. So if you want to know who you are and what your purpose is, well, you're to be a preserver and you're to be a light. We have 5 people today, 4 at this second service, people being baptized who have discovered for themselves what it means to start following Jesus. And they are discovering already what it means to be salt and light. So just to give one example, Rachel, who is now a trustee of an organization called Route to Freedom, that is looking to work with addicts and the homeless to try and help them to find a route to freedom from their addictive lives. She wants to make a difference, preserving the good, being a light. And what's amazing is when we do that, when we start to live that way, other people notice. So Corinne, who's getting baptized here this morning, it was through her friend Sean and Carrie, who both are followers of Jesus now. And she saw something in them and they invited her to church. And she has now committed her life to Jesus. We'll hear about that later. Nikki, who got baptized in our first service, she's only very recently come to faith. She started coming to church because she talked with someone called Chrissy Pinion. And Chrissy Pinion got chatting with her and answered some of her questions and then invited her to church. And it was just about 2 weeks ago that Nikki said that, she said, I've opened up my life to Jesus. And she was baptized earlier. Rachel spoke about James, telling his story of coming to faith. Now, these people aren't necessarily seeing them say, hey, I'm a city on a hill. That's not what they're doing. They're just trying to live out as best they can what it means to follow Jesus. And it gets noticed. So wherever you are strategically placed. If you're in a primary school, if you're in a family, if you're at work in an office, you are strategically placed to be salt and light. And why this is important is because proximity matters. Salt cannot preserve food if it's not with food. It just can't. So on Monday, we visited Anne Frank's house in Amsterdam. On Wednesday morning, we went to the Van Gogh Museum there in the city. His paintings have sold. I mean, the sunflower painting just there, I mean, that has sold for millions and millions of pounds. Really interesting. Van Gogh's story. Van Gogh grew up under a Lutheran pastor. His dad was a pastor, and he worked for an art dealer in The Hague. He went over to London. He lodged in a house, and he fell in love with the landlady's daughter. He was just besotted with her, and eventually he plucked up the courage to tell her that he loved her, but she absolutely dismissed him. She was already engaged to someone else, and his heart was broken. And so we went back to Holland, and he, whether it was through his father's influence or whether it was through the heartbreak that he had experienced, that he turned to Jesus and he wanted to make a difference. He wanted to be salt and light. And so he went off to Bible college in order to study, but he found the studies too difficult. And so he came away from that and he moved to Belgium, to Brussels, to an evangelist college where he could learn to share his faith. And while he was there, he started to work with the local miners. They were very impoverished. They were very, very poor. And so what he did is he dressed like them. He went to live among them. And so when someone was sick, he would nurse them. If someone's clothes were dirty, he would wash their clothes. He would help them to have food. For those who were dying, he would just sit with them, reminding them that they were loved and known. He was given a nickname called the Christ of the coal mine. This is Van Gogh, the person in the center there, Van Gogh. He was known as the Christ of the coal mine. And it was an amazing ministry that he had. And yet the church leaders of the day really didn't like it. They didn't like his dress, didn't like that he acted and lived with them, and they obviously found him a very difficult person. And so they forced him to leave the ministry. But he had been strategically placed to be salt and light amongst those people. Proximity mattered. And honestly, I believe the church got it wrong in dismissing him. But he obviously went on to do these amazing and beautiful paintings, which we got to see loads of in that. But his work amongst the miners captured something within him. So when he painted ordinary people, not celebrities of the day, the nobility. He just painted ordinary people that others of the day hadn't focused on. Now, we value Van Gogh's art. We do, because it reflects God's creativity, its beauty. But honestly, I think that God values his work with the miners, his humility, his compassion, and how he brought hope and life to those people. Jesus said, as he sat on that mountainside, you are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world. And what does salt do? Salt always preserves. And what does light do? Light always shows the way. So if you want to live a purposeful life, which is part of the good life, then look to do that. For some of you, you might want to get involved in some practical organizations that are working to bring about justice, maybe a fight against human trafficking. It might be the whole addiction or homelessness kind of thing. We can get involved in that, but we've just got to be salt and we've just got to be light, because that's the purpose that God has made us to have. Let's listen to two more people's stories of those who are discovering what it means to follow Jesus and also what it means to be salt and light for him. Take a watch.
My name's Kerry. I live in Stowmarket with my husband Liam. We've got two stepdaughters, Izzy and Erin, and puppy Darcy. I'm quite lucky for family. I have a really good relationship with my stepdaughters, which I'm really grateful for. I work as a paramedic. That's something that I really enjoy. I like helping people, so it's been a good way for me to be able to do that. I've been a paramedic for about 6-7 years now, and I thought my life was pretty planned out. I had my goals and where I was going to go with my career, and some things changed for me. So we ended up in Stowmarket, and we've lived here just coming up to a year now. I haven't come from a religious background. None of my parents are religious, and don't really have any friends who go to church or are religious, so it's not really something that comes up very much. So it was my stepdaughter Izzy that actually brought up religion. She'd been to a family funeral, and it brought up some questions for her, and she'd come and asked me and her dad if we believed in God, and she'd said this statement that just seemed really special or important at the time about how our relatives' life must have had more meaning than just what it was. So I wasn't sure what to do with that. I wanted to sort of nurture it, I guess. It seemed important. So I asked her if she wanted to go to church, which she said she did. I didn't really know where to go. I spoke to a cousin who I knew went to church in London, and she spoke to someone who had recommended the Forge. So I brought Izzy along and we went to a service, and it was really positive. It was very welcoming and not what either of us expected. I met Steve and suggested about meeting up to talk about it, religion, I guess, a bit further, and it was brought up about the Alpha course, and that was a really positive thing for me and a bit of a turning point as well. I was very apprehensive about coming, but I'm really glad that I did, and I met some really nice people as well that have, I guess, been on a bit of a journey themselves. For me personally, it's helped me put some things in my life into perspective and been really beneficial in I guess, sort of healing and forgiveness, and really a deeper understanding of God and religion and what it means to be a Christian. So for me, that's been life-changing. A relationship with God, for me, right now is somewhere that I can go, or someone I can talk to and put faith in, and trust that there is, for me, a plan and that I'm on, I guess, the right track. What's helped me form that relationship is praying and trusting and taking that time in my day to set aside and talk about what's going on. I've decided to be baptised as a step, I guess, towards that relationship with God.
My name is Corinne Watts. I am married to Andy Watts, and between us we have 6 children. I remember going to Sunday school when I was a lot younger, and then we did a spell with the Jehovah's Witnesses, and also the primary school I attended was very close to the local church. Leaving primary school meant my connection with the local church was lost there, and religion wasn't something we did as a family. I came back to church after my husband was diagnosed with a tumour, and we were waiting for a diagnosis at the time, and I have a good friend at work, Sian, and she was praying for us and had her prayer group pray for Andy. And also my friend Carrie, she was praying for Andy as well, and she'd recently joined the Forge, and so she asked if I'd like to go along one day, and that's how that started. I wasn't as apprehensive about going to the Forge as I was about going to a traditional church. We do have one in Rattleston, but I felt I might be judged on lots of levels for not having been for years, for not knowing the Bible back to front, for being married 3 times, and it just didn't appeal to me enough to go. But Carrie had said that the Forge was really welcoming and didn't judge, and so I went along and I found it was just that. It was such an open, friendly first experience. I was greeted on my first visit really well by everybody I met, and everybody seemed happy to be there. They seemed happy to say hello to you and interested in you. Carrie introduced me to friends she'd made on her Alpha course, and they've become friends of mine as well now. I would describe my faith now as something I'm more comfortable with, because going to the Forge is a comfortable experience, and attending the Alpha course made me feel more comfortable, and I feel more calm in myself, and I feel that it helps me in my everyday life. Jesus means to me, I've got a buddy, I've got somebody there with me now who I can talk to, and I pray twice a day to, and I just feel like he's a friend really, there when I need him, but always there as well. Have a plan that I usually have going on my Bible app, so I read a little bit of the Bible every day in that way. I want to be baptised so that I can feel like I'm starting afresh, in a way clean of everything that was before, and also to show to myself and others that I am serious, I am a Christian, and it's the way I want to live my life.